Our webinar on frost mitigation, hosted by Netafim UK. I'm Julian Griselia. We're going to start in a few minutes as everybody makes their way through from the lobby. If you look on your display, you should see on the right-hand side a chat panel. Please, if you have any questions or queries, please put your questions in there, and we will try and answer them for you. I think everybody is now in. We're scheduled to last for about an hour. So without further ado, I will introduce Tom Reinhorn from Netafim UK and Ziv Sharit from Netafim in Israel. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Julian. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our first webinar here in the UK about frost mitigation in vineyards. So before we start, let's go through what we're actually going to talk about today. So what's on our agenda today? So firstly, who we are. Not all of you actually have heard of Netafim, so we'd like to talk about ourselves a bit, what we're doing here in the UK and around the world, then talk about the frost phenomenon and what is exactly frost and how it affects us, and how we're going to fight this battle against our frost and our frost damage in the best way possible. And finally, talk about the frost mitigation with water and how exactly we can help you to plan out and build the system for your vineyard. Okay, so let's start our journey into the world of frost in vineyards. First of all, we're going to have a short poll to know exactly who we're talking to and who's joined us. So if you could fill this this poll, it would be really nice. And we'll start. Okay, so who exactly are we? I'll talk a bit about myself. For people who don't know me, my name is Tom, and I come from Israel, from a small village called Kfar Daniel in the center of Israel. All my life I've been running around vineyards from a very young age, as my dad has been the manager of our vineyard where we lived. I studied in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, agroecology and plant health. And when I finished, I went back home to work on the vineyard and manage it. Size of the vineyard was about 70 hectares. We were growing grapes for Carmel Winery, which is one of the biggest wineries in Israel, where I was involved, as you can see in the pictures, from planting to harvesting and installing all the irrigation and fertilizing equipment there. From there, I moved to work as a viticulturalist in a Carmel Winery, where I helped farmers and growers grow over 500 hectares of vineyards, from the premium wines in Jerusalem to the simple wines down in the center of Israel. And in 2019, I moved to the UK, where I'm based now. And I can say on a personal note about talking about vineyards and wineries and grapes in general, it's a very big passion of mine. So it's I'm very happy to talk to you today. So I want to introduce Ziv as well, which is situated in Israel, in a warm country. So hello, Ziv.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for letting me talk to you. As being produced, my name is Ziv. I'm an agronomist at the agronomical department of Netafim, dealing with all kinds of orchards, but focusing on deciduous and vineyards, table and wine grapes. And I've been doing that for more than 17 years, since 2003. Right now, talking to you from Israel, 21 degrees outside. Wow. Last weekend it was snowing here. So this is Israel. A few words about Netafim before we plunge into frost and wine. So Netafim was founded at 1965 at the heart of the Israeli desert. It was founded by farmers in order to help other farmers to gain more and do better. We are helping farmers all over the world, and we are pursuing our sentence to grow more with less. We work at any farm anywhere in the world, at any size. Some people know Netafim and they know that this is the number one company, irrigation company in the world, and they say, I'm too small for them. Not correct. We will work at any field and we will give solution, the full solution to any customer, any client, any grower, anywhere around the world. And these slides show it perfectly. We are the first number one irrigation company in the world. Worldwide, we're holding a bit more than 30% of the market share. You'll find us in more than 110 countries with more than 29 subsidiaries around the world. Our headquarters is in Tel Aviv, in Israel. 17 manufacturing plants all over the world, including Europe, Africa, everywhere. Globally, we are talking about more than 5,000 employees around the world, and our sales in the past 2 years passed the $1 billion sales. So this is in a nutshell who Netafim are. And that brings us to the next slide, in which we start to focus on wine. So despite the fact that the webinar is going to focus more about the frost phenomenal situation, just to show you that we are working in the wine business around 60 years. Wine, grapes, and grapes in general were one of the first crops that Netafim entered with our solution. And basically, when we talk about wine grapes, irrigation of wine grapes, we cut the world for the old world, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, classic Europe, and then you've got the new world, California, South Africa, Australia, Israel will be in it. This is the new world. Obviously, the first success that Netafim had with the irrigation system was in the New World, which adapted very fast in their hot and dry climate, the, the, the irrigation system, and so the benefits of it. But very fast, the Old World recognized the advantages of New World. The numbers that you see of hectares next to each country is the numbers of hectares that we sold as Netafim. Okay, so this is about 30% of the potential of each market. Some of it is sold by other companies, and some of it is still not irrigated, like in the UK. I hope that you'll change that. What are the challenges that you as a grower face in today's world? So we can count three major challenges. One is the unpredictable rain pattern. The other one is yield and quality balance. And the last one is frost. Tom is going to focus on that. First issue is the unpredictable rain pattern. In this slide, you see the rainfall per day or daily rainfall record in each of the different years from 83 more or less 80 till 2018. And without getting into many details, the major thing that jumped right into your eyes is the fact that it's unpredictable and irregular. So if you look at the not too long ago years from 2005 till 2008, something like this, a sequence of 5-7 years, dry 5-7 years, which makes it very problematic to grow without supplementary irrigation. We believe, and today we already know it, that irrigation system, drip irrigation system, will be the right solution in order to gap those problematic years. What will you do in the years when you have sufficient rain? You just don't use the system. You don't irrigate. You don't have to use something just because you have it. In a way, we look at our drip irrigation system for wine grapes as an insurance company. it will help you bypass the dry years. Next slide, show it in colors this time. This is the numbers of rainy days, or actually in brown is the number of dry days. And when you compare the data from 81 to the data of 2010, you see that all of Central and South Europe suffered from more and more dry days compared to north part of Europe. And also, if you look at your island, south of it suffered from more and more dry days. And under those conditions, the unpredictable rain pattern and the ongoing or the more and more dry days during the vegetative season, you should ask yourself a simple question. Under the climate condition and the commercial condition, can you afford yourself losing another harvest? I'm not saying that the next year is going to be dry. I frankly don't know. But you should be prepared with anything that you can in order to make sure that if another dry year will come, you'll be ready for it. So this is the issue of unpredictable rain pattern. The next issue that I'm going to talk about is the issue of yield and the quality balance. And there is a lot of legends and myths, some of them are not completely untrue, that if you have high yield, you get low quality of wine. It's correct up to a certain level, and the main issue is balance. If you will maintain the right balance between vegetation and yield, you'll get good yield, not too much, but good yield with good quality. Here I want to show you a few pictures from an experiment that was conducted in Bavaria in Germany. Again, a rainy area with summer rains, and over there they conducted this guy, Dr. Daniel, something in German, conducted over there in an institution called LVG. And this is the irrigation trial plot. To the left on your picture, you see the moderate irrigation or moderate watering, as you can see it, and to the right you see no irrigation at all. It's a row next to the row. You see the difference of the vegetation, you see the color of the leaves, you see the yellow leaves that tells us that the vines are suffering from drought. And to the right you see the very nice green color, no yellow leaves, good vegetation, and that means good assimilation. How do we know it's good assimilation? Compare the bunches. To the right, you see what happens without irrigation. You see the lack of uniformity within the bunch. You see the lack of berries within the bunch compared to the irrigated bunches. And one picture, or in this case, three pictures, talks more than 1,000 words. By the way, in this year, the experiment, the doctor irrigated only 5 times. You're not going to irrigate like we irrigate here in Israel, but those 5 times gave you the differences that you see here on the slide. And when you have this system, it's easy to use it and to get the good results that you want. Now I'll make a stop and pass the talk to Tom, back to Tom, to start and focus about the thing that we gather here today to talk about frost.
Thank you, Ziv. That was very interesting. And we'll be back to you later on as well during the webinar. Okay, so after we talked about ourselves and we got to know each other, we could start talking about frost and the phenomenon of frost. So what does frost actually mean and how it actually does affect us in the vineyard? So before we start, I want to just raise a question and see, what would you estimate the yield loss that was caused to you by the frost? Because we're talking about the frost damage here in the UK. So the first step of understanding our system and the talk of frost is saying, why do we say frost mitigation? Why don't we say frost protection? So the Oxford Dictionary says that mitigation is a reduction of how unpleasant and serious something is. In our case, we are mitigating against the frost damage. No one could actually predict the weather in the whole vineyard and on each and every single vine. So what we're doing is mitigating the damage in the vineyard. Because if we say that we're actually protecting the vine, we're talking about 100% protection. And we can't actually, no one could actually give 100% protection. And giving 100% protection is actually, all we need to do is remove our vineyard from harm's way, which is not very possible. Okay, so many plants can be damaged and even destroyed with total loss to crop from freezing weather conditions. But how does that actually happen? So once the ice is created on the outside of the cells, it causes the cells to lose water and dehydrate. And what happens is that they dry and collapse, as you can see in the picture below. And the sight of that is actually quite devastating. So over the past years, more and more areas, especially here in the UK, are exposed to more and more frost events during spring. But what is exactly frost and how does it happen? So frost is the coating of ice that forms in humid air and cold conditions. And that's as a result of decreasing of the temperature on the surface. The water vapor in the air is frozen on the surface of the leaves in the vine. But why does frost actually happen and how does it happen during spring? So during sunny days and clear skies, the solar energy from the sun is absorbed and stored in the soil. And then during the night with clear skies, the heat that is trapped in the soil leaves very quickly to create a balance between the top layer of the atmosphere and the bottom layer near the ground. So as you can see in the graph, the hot air goes up very, very quickly while the cold air comes down and stays in the bottom layer close to the vines, which means the temperatures close to the surface can drop below zero very, very fast. And that's our spring frost, which is a very, very big climatic event that could actually cause all the damage in our vineyard, as it normally happens during the sensitive stage of the growth of the vine. So if you talk about the growth of the vine, I'm sure most of you know this, but we'll just go over it again. During the winter, we'll have the winter bud. You can see here stage A, and at that stage, we're actually looking for the cold days and the cold hours. But from stage B, in the bud swell and the bud burst, when you get the green shoots and everything starts to grow, and the vegetative stage, the vine is very, very sensitive, and that's when we actually have all the frost events during the end of April until mid-May. So this screen, you could actually see the different years from 2017 to 2020 in the month of May. Now, as the colors, the blue colors become darker, it shows more and more days of frost. And we can actually see that the days are becoming cold. We get more and more days of frost during the month of May from 2017 to 2020. With 2020 being a very, very difficult year. And actually in 2020, more than 10% of vineyards reported up to 50% frost damage. And there were a lot of vineyards that actually reported over 90% frost damage, which is very, very crucial for the wine industry here. Okay, so I'll just stop for a second to see if there are any questions before we continue on. Julian?
Yeah, we've got one question here. It's actually for Ziv. You talked about Netafim's drip business across the world, but how many frost systems do we have?
I suggest that we will keep this question and let Tom describe all the options, and we will come back to this question. We're not going to leave it. Just let the first sequence finish, and then we will come back to this. Is my suggestion, Julian.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
And just for your information, Tom, the poll results of the people sat here, about half of them had frost damage up to about 25%. Another 10% of the people have up to 50%. Another 20% have up to 75%, and another 20% had more than 75% damage in 2020.
Okay, so that shows about what we talked about before and about the reported damage for 2020. Thank you very much for sharing that, Julian. Okay, so we talked about the frost and how it happened, and we did see that frost is getting more common every year, and eventually we did see how the frost can create that damage. So now we'll talk about the different practices to mitigate against frost damage, and I'll move the stage to Ziv. Ziv?
Yes. So first we have a poll. Choose which one you use or you know. And we will rather rapidly describe the options that you have got today in order to fight the frost. So the first method is by air. We've got all kinds of ventilators or chimneys from left to right. This towed ventilators move the air and moves also like a ventilator. And the idea in all those devices is to take the hot air, which is locked in the upper level of the atmosphere, and push it downstairs towards our vine, or in other words, to take the cold air, which might damage our vine, and to push it upwards. In any way, those devices create some kind of circulation within the vine, and this is also good for us because it means that the cold air is not going to be stuck in the lower level next to your vine. So, like I said, from left to right, this ventilator is towed to the tractor, stands at one place doing the frost event, and then those two chimneys, one of them is pushing the cold air upwards, the other one is taking the hot air downwards and spread it around. All of, surprisingly, different companies, different countries that make those fans, but surprisingly, all of the systems talks about efficiency or nice efficiency up to 4 hectares. So this is something that you'll see a lot in all kinds of the cities, including vineyards. Then you've got fire, candles, gas, whatever you want to call it. So to your right, you see the candles that you have to spread out all over your vineyards, and that creates two effects. One is some heat, which is in order to have a good heat, you need to have a lot of candles, like you see in the pictures. And the other effect is the smoke. The smoke creates kind of blanket over the vineyards and make sure that the heat that comes from the candles will stay at the bottom floor next to the vines. So this is something that is still being used a lot throughout Europe. What will be the future of this solution in the days that we are trying to reduce our pollution? Question mark. Next to it, to your left, this is actually it's a gas wagon. Just to the right of the wagon, there is a place to connect the wagon into a tractor. there is a huge flame that goes from this tractor and heats up the area next to it. The tractor goes around and around the vineyard, circulate it, and then creates a movement of hot air within the vineyard. Just imagine that you are the driver of this tractor, driving with this tank of gas behind your back. I wouldn't recommend to do that, but some do. So those are the few main options that you'll find today in order to fight frost. Tom will show you what we suggest to fight frost with water.
Thank you, Ziv. Okay, so the last way of fighting and mitigating frost damage is actually using water and using the heat that's released when the water is moving from a liquid state to a solid state. Now, I know that the thought of water freezing on the vine to protect it and to mitigate the damage that is caused by the frost is actually quite, I'll say, a crazy thing to think about, because we said before, frost will damage the crop, where we're actually suggesting to put water that will freeze on the vine. So let's just go through how it actually works and a bit about the science behind it. Okay, so frozen water on the vine. First, we need to look at it in two different ways. Firstly, what happens while the water goes from a liquid stage to a solid stage? And the second part is what happens once the water is solid on the vine. Okay. So water freezes. When water freezes, it goes through a reaction that releases heat. That heat is called latent heat. That everyone talks about it when we talk about frost and freezing water. Now, the latent heat is the energy that is absorbed or released by a substance, and in our case, it's water during the change of the physical state from a liquid to a solid. So the fact that water transforms from a liquid into ice actually releases heat into the vine. Okay, so 1 liter of water applied on the vine can release heat of approximately 300 BTUs, which is the British thermal unit, which is the way we actually measure heat. But saying that isn't a lot. We need to compare it to something. So I'll compare it to 1 liter of diesel, which we can use for heating the vineyard as well. So 1 liter of diesel used with a heater can release around 37,000 BTUs, which is a huge number. And I won't take it away from that. But if we use that 1 liter of diesel to pump out water for our system, that 1 liter of diesel can pump out up to 14,000 liters of water. Now, those 40,000 liters of water turning into ice during a frost event will actually release up to 4.5 million BTUs, which is 120 times higher than any common heater out there, which is a big difference. The second part of frost mitigation with water is talking about the heat radiation and conduction. That's actually the energy moving to the surrounding air as the water temperature is higher from the air itself. And then the micro surrounding around the plant once the ice is there. The second part of that is the ice barrier. So the ice and water that reforms over and over again on the vine actually protects the vine and creates an ice barrier between the leaf, which is around 0 to 1 degrees, up to the surroundings outside of the ice barrier, which is below freezing. So we're actually protecting the vine from the freezing air and creating that ice barrier. But what we need to do if we want to get the ice barrier, is to always make sure we're applying water and reforming the ice on the vine while we're having the frost event. Okay, so up until now, we talked about the different methods of mitigating the frost damage. And we talked about the how water can help us to mitigate that damage. We talked about the changing of state between liquid and solid, and how that actually releases heat, and how we don't need to be worried if we do that. And after that, we talked about the ice reforming over and over again to create that ice barrier to mitigate that damage. And eventually we talked about how water turning into ice and releasing that heat is 120 times more efficient than any traditional heater we actually know. Okay, have we got, Julian, any questions up until now about these different systems?
No questions. We'll come to there is some questions, but we'll come to them at the end.
Okay.
As far as the results of the poll, 5% of the people are already using water-based frost mitigation. 5% are using air suction systems. 14% are using fan systems. 14% also use bonfires, and 14% of people have nothing. 19% are using mobile towed burners, but most people, 29%, are using bougies or candles.
Okay, so that's interesting. Thank you, Julian. So after we talked about water, let's talk about how we actually move the water from our reservoirs and tanks to the vineyard itself and onto the vine. So what's our solution for that? Now, we need to compare these systems in two different ways: a full coverage and the targeted coverage. Right, so before I start talking about the two different systems, the full coverage and the target coverage, just one thing that we need to understand before we start talking about that. When we talk about water mitigating against frost, we need to talk about the precipitation rate on the vine itself, and not the amount of water released by every sprinkler and emitter we have in the vineyard. So as a basic rule, we can say that a precipitation rate of 3 millimeters an hour can mitigate damage down to around -5 degrees. So the more water we apply, we can go down to lower levels of lower temperatures and mitigate that damage. Now, we as Netafim, we recommend applying around 5 millimeters of water an hour to mitigate damage down to -6, -7 degrees. So now that we understand that we're talking about precipitation rate and not the amount of water per emitter, we could start talking about the full coverage system and the targeted system. So this is the full coverage system. Now, the full coverage system has been around, and people have been using it for a long time, and it does work, and it works really well. Now, with this system, we put a sprinkler on every other post, as you can see in the picture, and each sprinkler will use around 300 liters per hour per sprinkler to cover that. Now, it's 300 liters per hour, but what we're actually using is 5 millimeters of precipitation rate in the vineyard. Now, this system is good and it does work, but what it does, it uses a lot of water. Now, we need to pump that water, so it uses a lot of energy. That's one thing. The other thing is, we all know vineyards, and we've all been walking around vineyards all our lives, and we know that only 20% of the vineyard is actually our crop. The rest are pathways for tractors, for us growers walking up and down the rows. And when we use the full coverage system, we're actually mitigating frost damage on 100% of the plot. We don't really need to do that. If we could target our mitigation system, that would be best. And we do have a system to do that. Netafim has our Pulsar strip net system, which is a very special and unique system for the vineyard. Now, the strip net system sprinkler only sprays water in a strip of 50 centimeters, making sure we only target the vineyard, the vine, and not the pathways in between. The strip net sprinkler can reach to a distance of up to 6 meters, 6.5 meters as well, which helps reduce the amount of water we need. So how do we know exactly when do we want to start the system once we have it in place? So as a rule, we say that we start the system in temperatures of around 2 degrees above freezing point. And that is to ensure the fact that the water is starting to go through the system before we go down to our freezing point in the vineyard. And once we do that, we need to apply the water constantly until the frost event is over. Now, I know that some of you have posts in the vineyard that are more than that, so 7 meters or even bigger, that go up to 8 and 9 meters. There are different ways to overcome that with different metal rods and clips that we could put in the vineyard to allow the emitters to be in the right distance. Now, we say 5 meters here, like you could see in the picture, because that will allow the best and uniform way to ensure a uniform coverage on the row and on the vineyard. These emitters do go further up to 6 and 6.5 meters. It's fine, but 5 meters to be sure and positive about it. Okay, so this is the way the system works. But what is helpful about this Pulsar strip net system? So, like I said, the strip net and Pulsar sprinkler can help us achieve our target low flow system that we're looking for, because our problem here is water, and this system could uses 50% less water than the full coverage system that we have, because the sprinkler uses only 12 liters per hour, which means if it's 12 liters per hour, it's around 10 cubic liters per hectare per frost event per hour. The other thing is the coverage that we have. So it covers 50 centimeters of the row. So it covers only the row of the vine. It doesn't cover the rest, which we don't need to actually mitigate the damage from. We only cover the vine itself. The other thing is we're avoiding soil saturation, because we only apply 12 liters an hour on the vine. It's not too much water to cause soil saturation, so we're actually avoiding that, and it's easier to operate. And the next thing is easy installation and easy maintenance. The Pulsar with the strip net has a unique bracket, as you can see on the screen, that blue color thing, that you could just attach it to the post, and it's easy to take on and off, and it's easy to actually use in the vineyard. So once we talked about the Pulsar, we talked about the system and the targeted system. What does it actually mean to have this system in our vineyard? So before I'll go back, sorry about that. So when we have the system in our vineyard, we need to make sure again that we want to start the system at 2 degrees above freezing, because that's the main idea. We want to start applying water before the frost event is beginning. And we want to stop the water going through after the frost event is over. So when it goes back to 2 degrees above freezing, and once all the ice has been melted. If we stop the system before, so if we stop it only when it goes over 2 degrees, but there's still ice on the vines, we could cause damage as well. So we need to make sure these two things have happened. We've gone over 2 degrees and there's no more ice on the vine. Okay, so we've arrived close to the end of the webinar, so we can just go over what we've covered so far. So we talked about the frost in the UK and how it does affect the wine industry here and the vineyards. We did see that some of you have had frost damage this year. We talked about the different ways to mitigate the damage caused by frost. And we said that water to mitigate damage actually releases, it's 120 times more efficient than other heaters out there. And then we talked about the use of water in the vineyard in the best way, the targeted way that uses low flow and low amount of water to mitigate that frost damage. Okay, so these are my contacts. Thank you for joining us. Before we end, I'll just see if we've got any questions, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions about these systems and about how water's frost works. So I'll ask Julian if he could read some of the questions out.
Yep, we've got a few questions. Just before I say that, if anybody has to go early, we will be sending a follow-up mail to you after that. There will be a question, how have we done? So if you could answer that and send that back, that'd be great. But if you want any more information, please get in touch with Tom. So over to the questions. I mean, if we go back to the question from earlier on, globally, how much crop is using, or how many vineyards are using water-based frost mitigation?
Yeah, so I'll take this question, and I'll also try to answer the question of Charles L. about frost mitigation in other orchards in apples. I'll try to combine one answer for two questions. So to be honest, it's a bit hard for us to say exactly how many hectares do we have covered with our frost systems. What I can tell you, first of all, the frost fighting system with water is something that is with us more than 50 years. So it's nothing new. The new thing is what Tom presented is the focused water spraying with pulsar and gyronet. So if we're talking about global frost fighting system, from very low flow like the pulsar all the way to high flow, I can estimate a few 100,000 of hectares throughout the years we already sold. The pulsar is rather young in Netafim, a bit less than 10 years. So the estimation goes to about 10,000 hectares all over the world. In every continent, we have a few plots of pulsar for frost fighting. Most of them will be over vineyards. But yes, Charles, for your question, we do have systems over orchards, apples, definitely the modern thin wall apples that you have over there in the UK. We've got it as well, and it works wonderfully, and it saves also water over there, since during the frost season, the apples are very thin, and we can focus our water usage to a much smaller area, and therefore save a lot of water and energy. I hope I answered.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ziv. So another question, or two related questions. Should we empty the system after we've used it to stop the water freezing? And is there not a risk of water freezing in the pipes during operation? Perhaps you can take that, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Yeah, that's a good question. First of all, water freezing in the pipe during the frost event. I'll start from the beginning. One of the reasons we're going to start this system before we actually go below freezing is to make sure, first of all, there's water on the vines that we apply over and over again, like I said, to allow it to refreeze all the time during the frost event. And the other reason we do that is to allow the water to flow through the pipes before we go below freezing. Water, once moving in pipes and water moving in general, won't freeze in those temperatures. So we're going to start the water. The water will move very quickly through the pipes and through the sprinklers, and they won't freeze. The only comparison I could compare this to is comparing it between a small pond, and a stream of water or a river. Once the river is moving very, very fast compared to the pond, which is standing still, the pond will freeze and the river won't. So we're going to start the pipes very quickly. Now, during these frost events, there's no really reason to empty them in between the frost events, empty the pipes in the pipe system. Because we will go over freezing, so the water will just stand there. We just need to make sure the system works before the next frost event. Now, there are people that decide to empty the pipes and the systems during the winter. You could do that with pumping air through the pipes, opening one side of it and pumping it through. It's a decision that you can make. I think that's covered it, Julian.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, how much water per hectare will we use with the pulsar system?
Okay. Well, it all depends on the amount of sprinklers we have in the vineyard and the spacing between the rows. But on average, it's around 10 cubic liters per hectare per hour. So again, I don't know exactly how long a frost event in your vineyard is. We could check that if you've got weather stations in your vineyard. But let's say on average, a frost event is 8 hours. 8 times 10, 80 cubic liters per frost event per hectare. Julian?
Okay, that's cool. Also, where can I buy the system? And do you have dealers that can install and support the system?
Well, first of all, you buy it here in the UK, obviously. But you may be working already with some of our dealers. And obviously, we'll support them and support you if needed. We'll be more than happy to. And if you're not working with dealers that deal with Netafim, you could more than welcome to give me a call. You've got my email and my phone number, and we'll get you in touch with one of our dealers in your local area.
Okay, that's great. And some of those dealers do install and provide ongoing support, as far as I understand. Moving on then, if I've installed the sprinklers, can I use them for irrigation?
Yes, basically yes. Once you've got the system, the main thing is you've got the sub mains, you've got all the pipes in the ground, you've got the filters. You can actually decide to use them to add drip irrigation, like Ziv talked before, and use it as an irrigation system. I wouldn't recommend using the sprinklers as an irrigation system, as adding water into the crop and into the canopy during the summer could actually cause more damage, like disease. in the vineyard. So if you do want to use it for irrigation, because you've got the tanks, you've got the reservoirs, you've got all the submains there, is adding a drip irrigation system to it with only some connectors to the submains, if you'd like to.
Okay. Okay. Questions from two different angles. Same question. I've got drip irrigation installed already. Can I use the same infrastructure for frost mitigation? And the other question is, if I've got a frost mitigation system, can I use the same infrastructure for drip irrigation?
Isn't that like this? It's the same question now. I guess I think yeah, you can.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's subjected to hydraulic condition under hydraulic design or proper hydraulic design. The infrastructure, which means pump, valves, head system, mains, submains, can be used, and in many cases under Vineyards conditions, plant scheme, we've been able to use the same infrastructure for irrigation with drip and frost fighting with pulsar. This is one of the advantages of using a low flow frost fighting system. You can use the same infrastructure, but don't do it on your own. Consult a hydraulic designer in order to make it for you.
Okay, and while we're talking about the same system, Ziv, can we use the same system for applying fertilizer?
For drip?
Well, I mean, the question said system, but yeah, drip or...
Okay,
I mean,
yeah, so this is one of the advantages of investing in a way in two systems or in a system and a half, one that will fight frost effectively and the other one will irrigate effectively. When we irrigate through drip, so yes, the system not only it can provide nutrient and fertilizer, it's actually much more recommended to give the fertilizers through the drip directly into the vines of the vein or the veins of the vine without broadcasting it all over the roads and weeds. This way you can be much more pinpointed and save fertilizers. So this is through the drip. On the other hand, to sprinkler fertilizer through the frost fighting system over the canopy, not really recommended. Tom talked about the issues of increasing humidity and therefore increasing the susceptibility to diseases. So if you spray salty water, which are water with fertilizers, there is a good chance that you'll burn the leaves and damage them. So it's not really recommended to inject fertilizers through the frost fighting system.
okay, thank you. Then got a question. We said about starting at 2 degrees or 2.5 degrees. Is that not too early? Is frost not once you get to 0?
That is a good question. Well, frost is once you get to 0, but we need to look at the frost. You calculate frost with temperatures and the relative humidity in the vineyard. So depending on the relative humidity with the temperature, we'll get down to the frost event. So really 2 degrees with a relative humidity of, let's say, 90%, that could be around, if you put it into that calculation, that could be around 0.5 degree. So it's quite close to freezing. So we do have also we do have weather stations that can actually do that calculation and then show you when you should start the system, depending on if the relative humidity is lower or higher. The temperature which you need to start the system can change. So relative humidity going down, you might have to start the system a bit earlier. It all depends about the vineyard and the certain days that frost event will happen.
Then I just want to emphasize something. The level of 2 degrees uh, is not. It doesn't mean that we recommend to open the water anytime the temperature goes to 2 degrees. Only if you have frost alert and 2 degrees, two conditions, then operate at 2 degrees. This is what it means. Normally, if you've got rain or high humidity or even a good layer of clouds, then the danger of frost is not is much lower. So the fact that in those conditions, in rainy days, that you have 2 degrees, most likely you don't need to operate your system. It will be ready. So
Okay, thank you. Couple more questions before our time is up. Well, most importantly, how much does the system cost?
Oh, that is a good question. Well, I can't give you the exact cost of what a system does cost because it depends on a lot of things. It depends on topography, on the requirements in your specific vineyard, water supply, and all that. But with our dealers, we can design the system to be the best in the best way for your vineyard. So once dealers and us visit your vineyard, we could actually just see how we want to set it all up, and then we could get the price. It's very difficult to pinpoint a price right now. So if you give me a call and we'll set up a meeting with the dealers, it will be easier to go down that road. Sorry.
Okay. Where can I draw my water from? Do I need special water for the system?
No, special water. You don't really need special water because you've got filters before actually all the water goes through the sub mains and through the sprinklers. So water from rivers, boreholes, tanks, and mains, it's all fine. But depending on the quality, obviously, we could see what kind of filters you'll need for the system as well.
Okay. And just about finally, is there automation available for the system? As in, can it turn itself on?
That's another good question. There is automation for the system that can connect to the to the frost systems and to the automatic valves that we have. It's a system called Frosty, and it actually calculates that formula that I just talked about before with temperatures and relative humidity, and tells you exactly when you need to start the system. So what it does, it sends out a signal to the valve and it starts the system automatically. It's very, very, won't call it a stupid system, but what it does, it opens and shuts the system once it gets to a certain temperature that we decided about. On a personal note, during a frost event, I'd probably be in the vineyard walking around checking it all the time. I'd probably like, if it were me, to start the system manually. But if you've got different vineyards around and it takes time for you to get from one place to the other, there are systems that can start it automatically before you get there, and then you could just show up and see that it's working properly. There are automated systems that can work, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, our time is just about up, so I think there's a few questions we haven't answered, but we'll respond directly to you via email. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ziv. And
Thank you.
Please be in contact if you want some more information. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.